Hello, good morning, and welcome to Data Download. The story behind this feed is that we send this newsletter out to lots of you. We hope lots of you have subscribed. Some of you like being read to, and so we share the newsletter and a little bit of commentary on a weekly basis. But the most important thing that I would say is if you haven't subscribed, now is a really good time to do so. So I'm going to just put the banner up there. There it is. So those are our newsletters. We have 3. We have a monthly and 2 weeklies. They are fabulous. Data Download is one of them. And with that, it's a beautiful day in New York City. The weather is nice, sunny and warm. And 97% of my fellow New Yorkers are wearing masks, maybe down from 98 or 99 a couple of weeks ago. So mask up, please. Thank you very much. All right, so let's just get into the newsletter today. We have a lot to cover, and we're going to do it in just a few minutes. So first is this Fast Company article, which I have to say is fascinating. This is about how the New York Times decided to reorganize its homepage in order to be able to cover COVID-19 and its print cover, of course, as well. This is important. It's important because there's this kind of an asymmetrical news warfare going on where, every time the president gets in a helicopter or gets in a limousine or tweets, which is, 15, 20 times a day, or someone tweets for him and you don't really know whether that's the president of the United States speaking or somebody who's been authorized to use his Twitter feed. We've blurred the lines about what news is, and so for the Times to be able to find a way to make visual and impactful 100,000 deaths was a fascinating, complicated decision, and Fast Company covers it really well. So that's article number 1 in our newsletter for this week. Part of what we try and do as the Media Lab is pull out of this massive feed of information stories that we think either bring depth and complexity and value to the space we're in, or are things that may have gotten lost. And so, hopefully the newsletter on the weekend is a quick read and an interesting read. And then if you dig in and click on the articles, all the better. Next up, we seem to have a New York Times top of the fold theme going this week. Is an opinion by Ben Bensiger in the New York Times. And his suggestion is to take a social media break until you've voted. It's a good read. I'm not going to read it to you. But, I will just say this. A couple of years ago, I did a TED Talk about how to fight back against fake news. And at a time, there was a whole debate and people pushed back on whether fake news was a phrase I should be using or whatever. But when I rewatch it today, just 2 years later, some of the things that I advocated for, like being a responsible user of social media, seems nostalgic or maybe naive now in hindsight. So I think what Greg is saying here is essentially there is no way you can trust what you're getting in this feed. And by the way, the Media Lab had its big summit this week, and we had a fireside chat conversation with Tristan Harris. And he's the kind of lead voice in the movie that is now rocketing through Netflix, The Social Dilemma. And in it, he suggested to us this idea of trading your phone with another person just to see how different their social feed is to yours on Facebook. And what I thought was, he wasn't talking about, he did suggest that maybe it would be somebody that you disagree with, but, I think it could even just be, your significant other or a neighbor or a friend. And I think what we forget often is that, on a moment-to-moment basis, Facebook has, I'm going to get this wrong, 10,000 options as to what to present to you that are algorithmically relevant. Maybe it's 1 million. It's a huge number of things that are feeding from this massive triangular funnel into this tiny little feed. And so even among somebody who you politically and sociologically and demographically and ethically and aesthetically agree with, someone who's your doppelganger, I think you'd be shocked at how different their Facebook feed looks than yours. So I thought that was a good idea, and we'll talk more about Tristan and his work as we get further into the newsletter. But definitely take a look at this particular social media break idea. And I'm not sure that we're endorsing it as much as we think it's an interesting thought. Okay, next up, this is an article from BuzzFeed News, and I'll just read you the headline. The news site was bogus. Facebook still let it build a real audience. And this is, the Globe Independent used Facebook ads to widely promote plagiarized stories that were often critical of China. I think this is really interesting. I think in the same way, excuse me, I think in the same way that we're overwhelmed with information in media, I think you need to know that Facebook, both its algorithms and its humans, are also overwhelmed with inbound feeds. I have a kind of a personal theory here, which is that this whole idea that everything is free and that you can kind of publish to Facebook for free and read Facebook for free, quote unquote free, may be part of the broken internet, which is, it's why I get so much spam and so many, spam phone calls, because the cost to distribute them is negligible, if not zero. So read this article. It's a BuzzFeed News article. It's in this week's newsletter. If you don't have this week's newsletter, you can go get it. We distribute it all over the place, including on our Medium page. All right. Next up, speaking of Medium, here's a Medium article. Why media formats like Snapchat stories and TikTok music videos become hits. This is by Eric Feng. It's an 8-minute read, so you can zip through it. And I think in particular TikTok is somewhat generational. So, it might be that as a receiver of this newsletter, this is as good a way to get your arms around what is working on TikTok and why it's so different, and why I think for certainly a younger generation, younger than me anyway, the line between news, information, fact, fiction, jokes, memes, data is blurrier than you could maybe even imagine. It's a terrific read, it's thoughtful, and that's why we shared it. All right, moving on. This is a Gizmodo article, but doesn't appear to be loading at the moment. So let's go back here. That's down here. So this particular piece talks about how you can learn to type by copying literary masters. It's funny, and a little, again, the other thing we try and do with the newsletter is be a little bit off the beaten track, so that you're not just getting the same endless, overwhelming feed of political noise. By the way, I see a bunch of you have joined, and I've gotten some thumbs up, which is very nice. If you have questions, you want to join the conversation, we're on YouTube Live. We're also on Facebook. And if you post anything there, I'd be delighted to try and answer what I can. All right. Next up, we move to, oh, look, there's me being me. Very funny. So this is the Andrew Yang fireside chat that we did at the Media Lab this week. And there's a lot, it was newsworthy, which is great. I'm just trying to find there we go. Oh, where'd it go? Thank you. All right. Too weird having me and me on at the same time. So, a couple of things here. Andrew Yang is a politician. He's a technologist. He's an entrepreneur. He's a New Yorker, and a proud New Yorker. Grew up in Schenectady, New York, which, I know from a previous life. And his comments were incredibly interesting. And, here's why I think you should watch this video if you watch nothing else from this week. First of all, he's a young man. Secondly, he's an Asian American. Thirdly, he's a technologist. Fourthly, however you feel about universal basic income, UBI, his argument for it is reasoned and thoughtful and detailed. It's not like he made it up and threw darts at a board. And maybe most importantly, he's going to be part of our public discourse. I found talking to him energizing, and I didn't agree with everything he said. And Erica Matsumoto, my colleague, did a Q&A with him after the fireside chat. And people have strong feelings about his ideas, but they're not simplistic, which I appreciate. And I think, if the election ends up with a Democratic president of the United States, I think it's entirely likely that you'll see him in the cabinet. So was honored that he agreed to do the conversation with us, and think that there's lots of conversations in the future about technology in New York and the changing economy that we live in. And so really appreciated that he did that with us. And then last but not least, in the what we're listening to category, Tristan Harris has a podcast called Your Undivided Attention, which is relatively new and is doing really well and is growing on the Apple Podcast hit parade. And, again, part of what I'm really proud of in the Media Lab Summit that just concluded is, both Tristan and Andrew Yang, are not simple thinkers. They're both thoughtful and complicated and detailed and nuanced, and they bring a lot of value to the space that we're in, the media, technology, New York space that we're in. So appreciated that he joined, appreciated that he answered questions thoughtfully, and there's, again, made some news as well about the film and the film's success on Netflix and some of his surprises in the film. I won't give away the interview because at some point we'll play it on this podcast and play it out to our audience, but it'll probably go out in our monthly newsletter later next week. But really, two big personalities, really proud that they both chose the Media Lab to share their story with us. And then last but not least, in the deeper look, I've talked before about the Netflix and his new book. This is a good, thoughtful read on the book and also on the Netflix strategy. This is on knowledge.insed.edu. And this is how Netflix finds innovation on the edge of chaos. I like this article. I like the book. I like Reed Hastings. If you want to get a kind of a deeper, if you're not going to run out and buy the book, but you want to think about what the book kind of takes you through, this leadership and organization article is relevant and interesting. So with that, speaking of books, here's my book pitch of the day. Cory Doctorow was also at the Media Lab Summit and was fantastic. And this is his brand new book. And okay, I'm not going to lie, I like the color blue a lot, so I think it's attractive. But it's also very interesting. So with that, that's the data download for this week. Hope you read the newsletter. Hope you subscribe to it. Here, let me put the subscription button back up there one more time. By the way, the thing about free subscriptions is you can sign up You can get it for a couple of weeks. You can decide whether or not it's valuable to you. And if it isn't, you can unsubscribe. No sweat. And nobody will beg you to stay. And we won't send you one of those long questionnaires asking why you left. We'll just take your email off the list. So with that, have a lovely weekend. Have a good week. Enjoy the newsletter. And we will see you again right back here, hopefully, next week.